Welcome back to the Leaders of Leaders podcast. And yeah, if you've been here before, you might have just noticed something different. And if you're looking at the video, we have a new background. The reason for this was when I started the self-care zone, it was teaching more of what that personal self-care was. But it seems like there's a need now for business care, for that psychosocial component of businesses to look after their staff. Now, if you're still looking for some self-care, you can head over to theselfcarezone.com and everything is still available. But if you're looking for that psychosocial training for staff or that psychosocial structure, this is the place for it. Now, the Leaders of Leaders series is now a standalone podcast. The old episodes are still there, but moving forward, this podcast is just going to be the Leaders of Leaders series episodes. Now, given the change, I thought it was only right that I come on here and I tell my story. This is episode number 20, and I feel like I need to share my story. So here it is. I've worked in the disability space for about 19 and a half years. I started off as a support worker, where many of us have started off. Now, in that time, I had to learn really quickly how to look after my mental health and my self-care on the way home after a difficult shift. Maybe there was a medical episode, behavior of concern. And I thought about it. This was impacting my emotions and how I felt. So how can I look after myself? What could I do on that 40-minute drive home each day so that I could return to the same place, looking after the same clients in the same environment, and provide them the high quality care that they deserve? So I learned really on what self-care was for me. But I've noticed that no one talks about it. I then went on a journey where I did a Bachelor of Social Work, where it seems like in every breath, the importance of self-care was jammed down our throats. But again, no one's mentioned it. If self-care was that important for us to study and to learn while we're at university, how come no one's talking about it since graduation? It's almost like self-care is good in the protected environment of uni, but in the real world, it doesn't have a place. And that, to me, is the gap that I'm hoping to fill. Especially now with the work health and safety legislation that specifically states that companies are responsible for the psychosocial hazards of work, just as it would be for a physical hazard. You've got your slips, trips, and falls. But what about the stress and bullying and all these other psychosocial hazards? Companies are responsible for those just as much and in the same way as they would be for a physical hazard. So that's why the shift of business from the self-care zone to psychosocial safety, to fill that gap. Now, along those, call it 20 years, I've had my own journey to leadership. Like I said, I started out as a brand new green support worker and had never been in that environment before. But over time, I got some experience, some knowledge, some skills, and through changing companies and, different environments, I was seen as a leader. I didn't have a leadership title. If you go back and listen to the episode I did with Chris Hannon, we talk about the incidental leadership. And that's where I fell, in that incidental leader. But since then, I've also grown further. I've moved from the support work role where I was the incidental leader to being a team leader, where I had the well-being of the team that I was responsible for without the support of my manager. From there, I went to doing support coordination, child protection. I've done Brighter Futures casework, which is, stressful. A situation where I was doing Brighter Futures casework, I had the interview. It was a panel interview, and the position was 5 hours away. Had the interview. My team leader was part of that panel. I moved 5 hours for this job. And within 5 minutes of meeting my team leader face to face, who was part of that panel, I was told that I failed the interview. And the daily bullying continued from there. Now, I went and spoke to the office manager. Nothing was done about it. Everybody in the office knew what was going on. Everyone reported it, but no one did anything about it. This is the psychosocial hazards that we're talking about. It's the, lack of culture in a business. It's the bullying from managers and, secret behind closed doors. The team were more supportive than what my manager was. And that team was great. But it should have been the manager who stepped up. I then came back to the Newcastle area and moved back into the disability space, back to support work, back to being the team leader. From then I went and did a little stint as support coordinator, and that didn't last very long because I wanted to get into behaviour support. This is an area where I was told from team members that I was working with that behaviours were something that I was able to manage and delegate away from those who couldn't quite manage their emotions in support workers. This is probably because, I had an experience when I was very young where we lived with my nana and she had seizures, or like fairly regularly from what I remember. So seizures and that sort of stuff, although I was sheltered from, I was still aware of them. And for me, Nana was the first aid trainer. That's like I had an unofficial first aid certificate since I was 5. So those situations when there's high stress, people tend to go to that fight or flight for a moment. Well, for me, that's where I tend to remain calm and delegate and control the situation. And that's probably why I was suggested to get into behaviours. So that's where I'm working at the moment. I'm a NDIS registered behaviour support practitioner. Now, in that behaviour support role, there are times when, I've had to, there's been times where people have come to me and said, "Hey, what would you do in the situation?" I'm going back to that incidental leadership role. But again, this is a role where managers and the team leaders should be approachable. This is what supervision's for. And there's a number of Facebook pages I'm part of in the disability space where, people are asking these questions, and I feel like I've got the knowledge and the skills. I've been doing this for 6 years now, where I can give my knowledge and my skills and help guide other practitioners. But part of me goes back to the self-care and that no one's talking about it. So that's why I started the self-care zone, to try and fill that gap. But the more I went on, it was clear that what was needed was psychosocial education, not just self-care. Because self-care is part of it, but it's not all of it. Self-care falls under psychosocial. So if I go the next level up, what could I do there? My experience as a leader, as I said, was incidental. Very rarely has it been the team leader or that title role. I now have that role as behaviour support. And what I'm trying to do with my team is I'm not a manager. The way I see it is I'm a coach. And I'm not here to tell these other practitioners how to do their job. They're great practitioners and they know how to do their job. We're adults. My job is to suggest other ways, or to, hey, have you thought about this? I've got a new team member starting who's a brand new practitioner, but she's got a degree. She knows what she's doing. And I spent time with her last week, and she's got her first client, but she's a bit unsure of herself. So she's asked me to accompany her to her first home visit, and absolutely I'll be there to do that, to support her. But what I've seen in the past was team leaders who would go, there's your client, reach out to me if you need a hand. But for me, that I hadn't had that face-to-face home visit in this role when I started behaviour support. So I kind of felt like I was drowning a little bit. So now that I've got a team member who's in that same situation, I'm going to be there to support them through that journey. Now, and I've made this pretty clear that I'm not there to take over. I'll take some notes if she would like me to. But my job is to, when we walk out, sit down with her and debrief and coach her through that situation. Have you thought about this? Could you have done it a different way? And I've said to her, when we're done, we're going to go get a coffee and set you up for success. Because that's what I see a leader doing. That's the job of a leader. It's not, beat down your team. It's not, do everything for them. It's how can I support my team and reduce their load so that they can thrive. Now, this goes to the first level of the Foundations of Care program that I've got. It's a 2-year program. The first 6 months, the first 4 months is around stabilizing the culture and the business. I read a stat a couple of weeks ago that said that in 2022, the average recruiting cost for a full-time support worker was $23,000. In 2020, that was $10,000. So in 2 years, you've more than doubled. The average time to fill a position is 40 days. By the time you add those together, plus the cost of missed shifts, cancelled shifts, overtime to fill a shift, agency staff if you have to fill them, you're looking at around $30,000 to $35,000 to fill one staff member's role. And if you've got a team of 50, the average turnover in Australia in the NDIS space for full-time workers is 16%. So that means in any 1 year, if you've got 50 support workers, on average, you're going to lose 8. That's $300,000 a year just in recruiting costs. Now, for NDIS services who reportedly, all the services that I've spoken to, their average margin is 2%. 2%. But if we could find a way to save even $150,000 a year, every year, would that be better in the profit column or in the recruitment column? Would that not add to that 2%? So that's my program. It's called the Foundations of Care. If you want to have a chat about it, reach out. Send me an email to info@psychosocialco.com.au. Or you jump on the website, psychosocialco.com.au. Now, I'm going to answer the question that's been left for by the previous guest. And the question that's been left is, from your experience, what's one leadership lesson in the NDIS space that only really makes sense once you've lived it? And how has it shaped the way you show up for participants and your team? I think for me, the lesson was that we're taught, whether that's, explicitly taught or there's this undertone that's not spoken about, but everyone understands, in that my team needs me. It's the participants need me. I can't leave them. But that's causing damage to us as staff, but also to the participants that we look after. We're taught that, part of our job as support workers or, in the disability space is to support that participant. And that's our job. But when we can't support ourselves first, when it's, oh, Brett, we've got this extra shift we need you to fill. How often have you said no to that? I know for me, I've never said no to a shift. But looking back now, it's like, I should have. For me, how can I look after myself if I'm always at work? How can I be there for my kids if I'm at work? So the lesson would be that, as leaders, our job is to not just ring someone and say, hey, we've got this shift. It's, let's start with, how are you? Build that conversation with the staff. It's, I know you're busy, acknowledge it. I know you're busy, but we've got this shift. It's okay to say no. Support them to say no. Support them to say yes. Because if we don't support them to say yes and no, then we're letting the participants down. We're letting our staff down. We're letting the business down, because staff are going to burn out. Once staff burn out, they start looking elsewhere. When staff look elsewhere, so do participants. When things start to go wrong, that's not the time to start reacting. Things start to go wrong, it's almost too late. We should have been doing proactive strategies so that once things start, like surface cracks are showing up, that's when you start reacting. The proactive strategies is also listed in the work health and safety legislation. It talks about how proactive strategies to meet psychosocial hazards. It's like there's a lot of services out there that talk about, oh, we've got an EAP, we've got the EAP, you better call the EAP. But under the legislation, the EAP is a reactive strategy. It's, you call them once something goes wrong, once the wheels start to fall off. But that's too late. The proactive strategies that we put in place is how to have that conversation with your manager, teaching the manager how to have a conversation with staff. It's building that company culture through the proactive strategies. That's what's going to get you through that tough phase. How has that shaped how I interact with participants and staff? Knowing that I've been there, knowing that there's better options, and that, the way that managers are taught is often the way they were taught. The way that managers teach is often how they were taught. But the situation's changed now. The way things were doesn't have to be the way things are. So that's where we're going to leave it today. So welcome to Psychosocial Safety Co. This journey is a big one. because we need to look after ourselves first so that we can look after everyone else. And that's why I end the podcast the way I do, to remind us that we need to look after ourselves first. And it's also a reminder for me that I need to look after myself first. So have a great day, and I'll see you next time.